It is with the highest amount of solemnity that I announce my intention to introduce articles of impeachment today on the head of this America at Last executive branch that has been working since January 20th, 2021 to systematically destroy this country. The President of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden.
So that's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she's introducing articles of impeachment against Joe Biden, and you will never guess the reason why.
Joe Biden has deliberately compromised our national security by refusing to enforce immigration laws and secure our border, allowed approximately 6 million illegals from over 170 countries to invade our country, deprive Border Patrol of the necessary resources and policies sufficient to protect our country. And his administration has willfully refused to maintain operational control as required by the law.
So let's get this straight. Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks that Joe Biden is personally deciding the policies and funding for border control and ICE. Well, I got news for you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. That comes from Congress. So it seems like she doesn't even understand what her own job is here.
He has allowed fentanyl, the #1 killer of Americans between the age of 18 and 45, to overwhelmingly flood into our country and kill around 300 Americans every single day. These aren't just Americans, these are people's family members. These are their sons, their daughters, their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers, their cousins, aunts, and uncles. These are American families. His administration has lost complete contact with approximately 85,000 unaccompanied illegal alien children. And his policies have forced tens of thousands of illegal children into slave labor. Where are these kids? No one even knows.
Okay, now this bit has to be the most shameless part from Marjorie Taylor Greene, because notice how she talked about those children and the terms she's using as illegal and things like that, which speaks to her actual lack of sympathy for these children. The only reason why she's even bringing them up is because she wants people to be like, oh yeah, it's actually bad that Joe Biden is doing this and isn't actually doing enough to make sure that undocumented children are being taken care of within the system, which is literally true. That's a true critique, except for Marjorie Taylor Greene is cynically using that because she doesn't actually care. She wants those kids deported. So let's not sit here and pretend that Marjorie Taylor Greene actually cares about undocumented children. Because if you notice the term that she said earlier, where she used the term invasion, people aren't invading. They're not rolling in with tanks or anything like that. It turns out people are just trying to immigrate to the United States. And the reason why there's a lot of undocumented workers in the United States and undocumented immigrants in the United States, and I know this is wild, is because giant corporations actually encourage this. You see, what ended up happening with NAFTA and these other trade deals was they effectively created an open border system for capitalists who want to invest from one country to another, while simultaneously closing down borders for workers. The whole purpose of this was to make it harder for workers to move from one country to another in order to demand higher wages or to benefit from higher wages, but to make it easier for companies to move from one country to another in order to drive wages down. Then on top of that, you have companies that love hiring undocumented folks so that they can either get paid under the table or so they can be threatened with deportation if they ever try to unionize or get basic labor protections enforced in the workplace. That fundamentally is why the immigration system it is in the United States. It is fundamentally a combination of outright racism on the part of the people who want to use racism and xenophobia in order to prevent people from immigrating to the United States entirely, and then profiteering on the part of giant companies who want to use this system of undocumented workers in order to have a hyper-exploitable class of workers within the United States and in order to trap people in poorer countries so they cannot move to the United States, which would force them to raise wages in those countries as well as the United States. Because fundamentally, as long as these capitalists are able to play this game of jumping from one country to another to go wherever the wages are the lowest, they will be able to drive wages down across the entire planet. And that is why Marjorie Taylor Greene feels so comfortable being so extremely and overtly racist here. Because she knows that there are a ton of corporations that are willing to profit off of this system. But what can't be explained is why Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks that this is what Joe Biden is going to get impeached for. It fundamentally speaks to both Marjorie Greene's absolute drinking of her own Kool-Aid, on top of also her complete disconnectedness from reality. Because this is not a thing that even other Republicans will really jump on board with. Because it just is silly on its face. It just seems like Republicans are upset that there's any Democrat in the presidency for whatever reason. That fundamentally, Republicans have completely given up on any type of idea of democracy. Which, to be clear, they've never really believed in democracy. That's why Republican states are so rigid with all of their voter disenfranchisement policies. They do everything they can to make sure that people cannot get the right to vote. That's why in states like Tennessee, something around 8% of the entire voting age population is denied the right to vote purely based off of prior felony voting laws. Fundamentally, at their core, the Republican Party is deeply, deeply racist and very much outright fascist. And the fact that people like Marjorie Greene can be prominent figures within the Republican Party speaks to how absolutely unhinged both Republican Party voters and officials are, on top of their extreme willingness to actively encourage racism within their party and across the country. Because if there's one thing that above all else is the bread and butter for Republicans, it's causing misery and suffering, especially in any bigoted way that they possibly can.